Hello, everyone, and welcome to this first webinar in our 2024 science series entitled Blooming Against Odds, Successfully Navigating Mental Health in Rare Disease. I'm Erica Berg, Director and Senior Editor for Custom Publishing at Science, and I'll be the moderator for this discussion. This is our fourth year exploring the challenges and successes in the rare diseases field from various angles. Last year, we tackled advocacy, and this year, we are shifting our focus to what we can learn from personal stories of triumph. In this first webinar, we're looking at an issue that impacts everyone, mental health. Living with a rare disease can be an isolating experience with impacts on both physical and mental well-being. Yet, the global community of those affected is vast, numbering over 400 million. Today, we aim to shed light on the unique challenges faced by individuals living with rare diseases and provide insights into evidence-based strategies for maintaining mental health resilience in the face of adversity. Before we get started, I wanted to give a few instructions to our viewers about how to use the viewing console. Just to the right of the video window is the Presenters tab, where you can find photographs and biographies of today's speakers. You can log into your social accounts during the webinar to post updates about the event. On X, you can add the hashtag #ScienceWebinar. We pre-recorded this webinar a few weeks before this broadcast, so we won't be able to take live questions from viewers. But we'll do our best to cover the topic as comprehensively as possible in the limited time we have. You can feel free to leave comments for us at the Ask a Question tab to the right, and you can reach us there if you're having any technical issues. You can also email feedback to webinar@AAAS.org. Finally, a thank you to Foundation Ipsen for sponsoring today's event and this series. I'd now like to take the opportunity to welcome a brilliant panel today. I'll give each of them a chance to say hello and introduce themselves. Here in our studio at the National Press Club, we are pleased to have Tanita Allen. Welcome, Tanita.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Would you like to share a little about yourself?
Yes, I have Huntington's disease, and Huntington's disease has been described as having Parkinson's, ALS, and Alzheimer's all combined. And it's a neurodegenerative disease. There is no cure at this time. I did not come from a family of, I didn't come from this family, from a family with this disease. I am the first person to be diagnosed with Huntington's in my family, and I was diagnosed in 2012. And I had many obstacles as a result of my journey being diagnosed. I was told over and over again that African American people do not get this disease. And that was definitely a hurdle that I had to overcome.
Thank you, Tanita. Also with us in studio, we have Juliet Lyons. Hello, Juliet. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm really honored and excited to have an opportunity to talk about this and feel like I'm heard, like with rare diseases. There's not a lot out there for us, and so it's exciting to get to share. I'm a recording artist, a singer-songwriter, and composer. I was diagnosed with idiopathic subglottic stenosis, which is a mouthful, in 2019. It's a rare airway disease. It basically means stenosis is narrowing, subglottic is just below the vocal cords. Idiopathic means there is no known cause for the growth of the scar tissue. It's an interesting disease because it's like a Groundhog Day situation. Day one is when you have surgery to clear out the scar tissue. And you wake up and you breathe normally like a normal person, and it's the best feeling in the world. And then as with the nature of scar tissue, as time goes on, the scar tissue starts growing back, breathing becomes more and more difficult, and you due for another surgery. For me, I'm having 2 surgeries a year. It's a little different with everybody, but this has been my trajectory, and just working with it.
Thank you so much, Juliet. And now on to our guests who are joining us remotely. Let's start with Dr. Kathleen Bogart, since she's a returning guest here on our science webinar series. Kathleen, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be here again. I'm a big fan of this series, and it's so important to raise awareness about rare disease issues and to have these conversations with people who live these experiences. So I was born with a rare disorder called Mobius syndrome, and that results in some facial paralysis and limited eye movement. And this condition is congenital, so really it was my parents who went through the initial diagnostic odyssey, and it took a couple of years to find my correct diagnosis. During the meantime, we got some false starts and misdiagnoses, and at one point, my parents were even told that they should institutionalize me. My my experience with rare disease and growing up really made me fascinated with the experience of looking different, communicating differently, and having a rare disability experience. And it led me to study disability and rare disease in my field of psychology. So now I'm a professor at Oregon State University in the School of Psychological Science, and my research, teaching, and advocacy work all center on rare disorders and disabilities. So today I'll be sharing through both the lens of someone with lived experience and through the lens of someone who has worked with many populations with rare disorders.
Thank you, Kathleen. And finally, a warm welcome to Matt Boltz-Johnson. Many thanks for joining us, Matt.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's great to be on the panel and, as Kathleen said, raising the awareness of the impact of rare conditions on mental health. I work at Eurodis. I'm the lead for mental health in our community. And Eurodis, if you don't know of the organisation, we're in an alliance of patient organisations. We have over 1,000 members in 74 countries. And I've been at Eurodis now for over 10 years. And in working with the community, I haven't met one person from the rare disease community who hasn't said this is not a big issue for them. So the fact that we're now able to put mental health into the spotlight and center stage to take action is a great place to be, and I'm thrilled that the opportunity to talk about it today.
Thank you so much, Matt. So let's get started. I think we've heard a couple times in our introductions this concept of the diagnostic journey. So we're going to start talking even before diagnosis. So Tanita, this first question will be for you. I know from your book, We Exist, which wonderful read, like not even joking, it's tremendous, really powerful, that your diagnostic journey was full of twists and turns. Can you share with us a little bit about that journey and how it impacted your mental health?
Well, as I said, I didn't come from a family with this condition, with a history of this condition. So for me, this was all new. Back, when it took about 2 years to get diagnosed, it all started with involuntary movements in my toes. And that spread to my fingers and then the upper trunk, my face, and my whole body was out of control. And a lot of times I would go to the emergency room and I was misdiagnosed as having a mental illness. misdiagnosed as being intoxicated or under the influence of drugs. I was also accused of being drug seeking because I was coming back frequently to hospitals for help. And I had gone through many institutions with many different teams of doctors who were neurologists, movement disorder specialists, and who were definitely very educated in the, in the field of neurology, but because I am African American, that was a barrier for them in diagnosing me properly or giving me the proper diagnostic testing that I needed to come to this conclusion sooner. Instead, I was told over and over again that that was the one condition that they knew for a fact that I did not have because of my race. I was told over and over again that it had to be something else. This had to be mental. This had to be, stemmed in something else, perhaps. And it was very frustrating for me. I went through a lot of depression and anxiety. I was afraid. My body and there was a disconnect between my body and my mind because my body kind of like had a mind of its own. And it was, with the choreatic movements that I know to be now are choreatic movements, but the involuntary movements were very hard to control before I was diagnosed. And it was very, for me, it was very embarrassing to be out in public, to be amongst strangers. People were afraid. People would get up and change their seats on the train. People would hold their kids closer to them in fear that I might be dangerous. People would assume that I was, like I said, under the influence of drugs. And it was very hard for me. It was very scary because I've never been an alcoholic, never been on drugs. And I was absolutely terrified that, whatever was going on with my body, I was scared that I would never find out the truth. So for me, that was a lot of depression, lots of anxiety, a lot of frustration with the medical community, going from institution to institution and being told over and over again that there was no answer, and that I basically had to live with this, state of functioning. So for me, it was very, very difficult. And I went through a great deal of, I was stressed out all the time. I isolated myself from everyone as much as possible because I was embarrassed to be out in public, because I was ashamed that, I couldn't control my body and I couldn't, get myself to stop shaking. And so for me, that was, it was really a really dark period of my life.
That sounds absolutely awful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Thank you. And you never know what people are going through, so be kind on the bus. Juliet, will you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Yes. I feel very fortunate that it wasn't like that. I do think it's a bit of a unicorn situation, actually, for me. The more and more I talk to people with rare disease, and particularly in my community, that they've gone through situations where, okay, so for me it started with, I had to cough and clear my throat all the time. And that went on for years without any other symptoms. And I wasn't concerned about that particularly. But when I started to get concerned is when I started noticing that I was getting winded and like having to huff and puff and just really not getting enough air when I was exercising, like on exertion. And I started to talk to, my inner circle, like, it's kind of weird. And I remember my sister saying, well, you're just out of shape. And I was like, yeah, but this seems a little extreme for that. And it got worse to the point where just going up the stairs, I would be like gasping for air. And so I knew something wasn't right. And I could also tell because when I was anxious, I would have the same problem with not getting enough air. And sometimes I could be anxious before that and not even realize it just because it's internal. But when you don't realize how it affects your breathing until your breathing is compromised. And then I was just like, ugh. And so at the time, I had a PPO insurance, and I feel like that was what made the difference for me because rather than, what I hear from other people like, oh, you must have asthma, just get an inhaler, you have acid reflux, or you just need to lose weight, I was able to refer myself to an ENT, and on that very first visit with a laryngologist, he put a scope down my throat and he could see what was happening. And so I had the diagnosis immediately. And that's traumatic enough just to be like, okay, this is chronic, this is the rest of my life. My doctor kind of said, you're probably going to need to have surgery, and we're not going to rush into it, but we'll have that plan in place, and that's exactly what needed to be done. And so, that was a lot to process on its own, and I can only imagine what it's like for people who go through years of not knowing, not like, oh, you just need to lose weight. I see that so much in our community, and people are actually dying, like their throat is closing up, and sometimes it's to the point where an emergency tracheostomy is needed because no one's taking them seriously.
So I feel like we have kind of two extremes of the diagnostic journey. And Kathleen, I was wondering if you could speak to, how common are these stories and these, in these mental health challenges during the pre-diagnostic stage, and what are the common psychological impacts of these varying journeys?
Yeah, so unfortunately, both are common. Tanita's story and similar ones we hear all too often. And in fact, our research shows that people wait 5 to 7 to 9 years on average to get their diagnosis. So that is a very long time to live with this uncertainty and invalidation. We also see that women and people of color are more likely to experience an extended diagnostic odyssey and experience this invalidation and accusations of drug seeking and issues like that. So, this can result in healthcare trauma, right? So it's hard to develop or rebuild trust with a healthcare team that has sent people astray, that has misdiagnosed people, potentially given people treatments that are not helpful and in fact sometimes harmful. And people can feel quite stigmatized. I really resonated with Tanita's story about being stigmatized on the train. I'm also someone who has a visible rare disorder, and because our conditions are not well known in the public, it can mean that there's a lot of misunderstanding and fear. So that's a challenge that individuals with conditions that are sometimes visible experience. And there's a different kind of stigma that people with invisible conditions experience. And that is, even more invalidation, right? So if the condition can't be seen, doctors may say, oh, it's actually a psychiatric condition and it doesn't have a physical basis. And people can experience a lot of invalidation from people around them as well. You don't look sick, just buck up and figure it out. So all of this means that people are often so relieved to get their diagnosis. And this can actually be quite surprising for doctors because sometimes the doctor might think this is a bad news diagnosis, right? But even with diagnoses that, maybe have some emotionality attached to them, at least it's an answer, it's certainty. And we find that once people get their diagnosis, their mental health improves. And I know that Matt will share about the wonderful benefits of connecting with community once you get that diagnosis.
Yeah, thanks, Kathleen. Matt, yes, how we've had a rough diagnosis. How can people set themselves up for post-diagnosis and really, setting themselves up for good mental health in the long term?
Thanks. And I just want to underline what Kathleen says. Gender bias is real. For a lot of rare conditions, being a woman, it takes longer to get a diagnosis because you're dismissed more readily. You're being classified that it's you're over anxious, you're depressed, and that just is a big issue which is still really underseen in today's society and only now starting to get visibility. I think that sense of always having to speak to clinicians or even people in the community, like family members or friends, and that low awareness of rare diseases really has an impact. It makes people feel very isolated. And it's frustrating having to constantly repeat what the condition is and how it affects you, and no one really understanding the implications or the severity, really, if there's coming with invisible disabilities or what the risks are in the future. So I think when you get a diagnosis, one of the things which has the biggest impact is actually being able to connect into a community of people with lived experience with the same condition, people who've walked that journey already. That sense of belonging which you get is a game changer. Being in a room for the first time with other people with Huntington's disease is such a validating experience that they know you, they understand your situation, and that sense of community is, I think, the lifeline which the rare disease community has. Unfortunately, I think a lot of time the appreciation and recognition of how important that is overlooked. So when someone gets a diagnosis for a rare condition, medical professionals should connect them and give information to a patient group for that condition, or direct them to an alliance like NORD, the National Organization for Rare Disease Disorders, because they can direct you to the right group and community. And when you're in these types of communities, the type of support which I need or what Tanita needs could be very different. There's not one size which fits all. So being in a community, it gives you the opportunities to get some peer support on a one-to-one level, or to connect in more social groups, whether that's a Facebook group, a private group. And these groups are, as I said, a lifeline. So the last bit for me is when you're in these communities, they help you navigate the journey ahead. They give you trusted information. Instead of doing Google searches and getting the pictures of the most severe worst case scenario, which are terrifying, they settle a lot of fears, and they, in a very uncertain world, they give a level of clarity and make things more certain in terms of what's going on now and enable you to live in the moment. So I believe these communities should be elevated more and recognized more, because I think they're the foundation of what we call psychosocial care.
Thank you. And I do want to hear sort of your experiences with these types of communities. But before we get there, Kathleen or Matt, I'm curious, is there, it sounds like anecdotally for sure, these communities, these supports are wonderful. Is there any, have researchers looked into this at all to explore the benefits of these types of social groups, and is there a type of community that might be more advantageous than another? Is a Facebook group the same as sort of meeting in person? Is there any guidance, sort of, if you were going to go and seek a community, what might be best?
Yeah, well, I love this question, and I just want to echo everything that Matt has said. I have seen the wonderful benefits of connecting with that peer support community. And in fact, I did some research on the experiences of people with Mobius syndrome, which is the condition I have, who attend or did not attend a support meeting in person. So just to back up a little bit, as Matt was noting, many rare disease organizations offer support at some level. Sometimes it's online groups, Facebook groups. Sometimes organizations will have kind of in-person meetings, and it's pretty common that they will occur maybe once a year, once every other year. Here in America, right, we're a really big country, and often this is a big deal to travel across the country to be in a space where for the first time you will meet others like you, because our conditions are so rare that we would never encounter someone like us in our everyday communities, right? So the Mobius Foundation does a conference like this that is primarily focused on peer support and building community, and mixes in some expert information as well. And so this study that we did examined, it's what's called a pre-post quasi-experimental design, where we examined people who did and didn't attend the conference. And we found a variety of benefits for those who did attend. And that includes reduction in stigma, increased social support, and increased knowledge. Now, I want to note that the two groups are not necessarily equal, right? The people who went to the conference maybe had some extra privilege, right, and the ability to travel. And often these organizations will offer funding and things like that, which this organization does, but it doesn't cover everything. So we were also interested in understanding barriers to accessing conferences like that. And financial barriers were one. Of course, the extra toll that travel can take on your body, and also, if you have a large family, uprooting that family to travel and taking time off of work and all those things. So there's a lot of different barriers that we can think about when we talk about different ways of accessing peer support. So, when people do experience those barriers, we think it's really important to advocate for more funding to help people to go to these in-person events when they want to do them. But that also really speaks to the benefit of having a variety of approaches to offer support. So those support groups on Facebook, sometimes they will have Zoom meetings. So those are all great ways to get connected. To my knowledge, we haven't kind of directly compared the different modalities, but this is just speaking anecdotally. I do think that there is some kind of extra benefit to being in person, surrounded by others who have had the same experience as you, and perhaps look like you as well, if you have a visible condition. But I think any way of getting support is certainly worthwhile.
Great, thank you. And I was hoping, Tanita, if you could share sort of your experiences with the HD community. How do you engage with them, and how has that benefited you, having those experiences?
Well, first I want to say that the HD community is a beautiful community. We're small, but we're mighty. And meeting people with Huntington's disease or people that come from families of Huntington's disease has been a game changer for me. It's like having another family, an extended family of support. It's incredible. Going to the conferences, going to conventions, going to having Zoom meetings, or being part of Facebook groups or support groups has been amazing within the HD community. There is an organization that specifically that works directly with families, Help for HD. They have been amazing. They work directly with families, providing a wealth of information, as far as places to go, how to get assistance for help, and even getting their medications, to specific information about the latest research on Huntington's disease, and health centers that are within their areas. They can find out where to go to get treated, what specialists are needed. It's been amazing to connect with them, and I am so grateful.
And do you mostly connect online, in person? Do you have particular
I do both.
people? Yeah.
Yeah,
Great.
I do both.
Lovely. And Juliet, you want to tell us a little bit about your support networks?
Yes, I was just Googling idiopathic subglottic stenosis, finding all the scary answers, Matt. And I wasn't particularly looking for a support group, but some information from Living with Idiopathic Subglottic Stenosis, which is the support group I'm in on Facebook, came up, and I joined, and it was one of the best things I could do because I suddenly didn't feel so alone. And these people get exactly what I'm going through. And I'm not the most active person in the group, but just getting on the page and reading people's stories and what they're going through at whatever point in this Groundhog Day thing, like, oh, it's a surgery day, or oh, I'm really gasping today, like whatever it is, I get it. And I've posted before too, and people are there for me. I think another aspect that has been cool about it is we're comparing notes, and it's educational as well. For example, none of my doctors had suggested using a saline nebulizer, and that's information that's in the group that's helpful to just dealing with all the postnasal drip stuff. And so, we're getting tips from each other. We're like sharing ideas, like, have you tried acupuncture? We're all just trying to help each other live better.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Matt, you said something before about, building trust that it might be lost during the diagnostic journey for a healthcare team. And I want to talk a little bit about the healthcare team as maybe part of that community. I don't know, Tanita, maybe you could tell us a little bit about how do you engage with your healthcare team, and what role does that play in sort of your mental wellness?
Well, my healthcare team is the best. I have the best as of yet that I've ever had throughout my journey. And what's so great about my team is that we approach my health in a traditional way and a non-traditional way. So, for example, diet and exercise, focusing on sleep hygiene, tracking my mood, having a journaling, taking medication I take medications every 12 hours, but in addition to taking medications every 12 hours, I also implement other tools. I definitely seek therapy, peer support. I work with social workers. It's, any kind of specialist that's needed, such as a physical therapist sometimes. Maybe I might need a speech therapist. Maybe sometimes, there might be a need for trying something new, like acupuncture. I've tried that. I've done so many different, there's so many different types of approaches with my care. And these doctors are very open to, widening the horizon of because every HD person is different. You could put 10 HD people in a room and we're all going to be completely, there are some similarities, but for the most part, we're all individually different. So I like the approach that my team of doctors have, and that's to treat the symptoms, but also to look at it in a holistic way.
And how did you went from a situation where doctors weren't believing you and they were doing, not really getting you where you needed to be and giving you the test you needed. How did you go from there to finding this dream team of providers that seems like they're really modern and proactive in terms of treating the whole patient?
Well, once I got a definitive diagnosis through DNA testing, it was crystal clear that I had the genetic disease, and that I was in fact symptomatic. So I'm not just gene positive, I'm symptomatic. So the doctors that I moved back to my hometown, and the doctors in my hometown were, specifically I went to a Huntington's disease clinic, a clinic that's only for HD people. And they have a comprehensive team of doctors that work together to handle your care. And what makes it easy is that it's a clinic specifically for Huntington's disease. It's not just like some, general place. They understand the symptoms. They're very supportive in trying, they're very open to listening to me and hearing what I have to say as far as my feedback on any kind of medications that are prescribed, or, maybe something needs to be tweaked, maybe some meds needs to be eliminated, or maybe I should, I bring in journals and we discuss, my sleep patterns, my mood, how's my anxiety levels, how are my anxiety levels, how are my, how am I as far as depression? They take all that into account, and that's what I really like about this team of doctors. That's why, to me, they're the dream team.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Juliet, what's your experience with your healthcare team? Once you got that diagnosis, how did you find who you're working with, and how has that impacted sort of your mental wellness around your condition?
Well, first of all, I want to say that sounds like a dream to have like a Huntington, to have like an idiopathic splenotic stenosis center. It's 2 in a million for us. Two people are diagnosed in a million. So wherever that would be, gosh, that sounds great to have something very specifically focused. But again, an advantage for me is living in a big city, living in LA, where I have access to multiple doctors who could actually perform this surgery, for example. My doctor is awesome. He is very sympathetic. He's empathetic. He always pats my shoulder, says, "I'm sorry," every time he gives me a steroid injection, because they're no fun. And he's very open to, because it is a little bit of a Wild West, they're still figuring out the best treatments and stuff for our situation. So if I say, "Can I try another steroid shot?" He's like, "Yeah, let's try it." So it's really cool to have somebody listening and I feel like he cares about me. And I think that's really, really important to have that connection with the guy who does all the work on my trachea. And he always tells the surgery team, like, she's a professional singer, be very careful when we intubate. So I trust him, and that is very important. On the side, I have a cognitive behavioral therapist that I've been working with for many years, and she's amazing too. And I feel like having that focus on my mental health as well, having that opportunity to focus on that, makes a big impact.
It's great. So glad you guys have found these people that are working for you and helping you out. But this experience may not be as common as we might want it to be. Matt, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about, where healthcare providers are with respect to their awareness of the mental health issues related to rare disease diagnosis, and just any strategies that people with rare diseases could employ to find a dream team of their own.
I think what's important to highlight, we've surveyed our community, and the majority of people, when they find the specialist, the dream team, medical team who knows about the condition, they feel very happy with the physical healthcare they receive. But 85% of them said that their emotional and mental health needs aren't being met. So with rare diseases, you have a complex set of holistic needs. And when you see a physician, it's important that it's not just the physical healthcare which is being addressed, but there's some level of support, psychosocial support, which is provided at the same time. One critical point in the rare disease journey is the point of diagnoses. And when someone finally gets a diagnosis, after 5-6 years of trying and seeing multiple specialists, how that diagnosis is delivered can either empower someone to face the challenge which they've been given, or it destroys lives. So communication at that point of diagnosis is absolutely critical to really empower people to take on the challenge. And what happens at that point, if it's done poorly, it can cast a long dark shadow over all the future healthcare interventions or contacts you have in the healthcare system in the future, because trust is eroded and you'll never get that back. So for me, we need to do two things. Medical care needs to be enhanced to be more psychologically informed. So every time you speak to a nurse or a doctor, they consider the whole person which is in front of them, not the patient, but the person, that the individual is listened to, but also heard, and checking in, going, are you okay today? How are things going? Understanding that point in the journey, understanding the resources the individual has to live with the treatment which is being given. And the resources, I mean by that, is there a support network? Is there a family there, or are you alone? And really just focusing in on the needs of the individual at that point in time. It's called holistic care. It sounds quite simple, but in most cases that's not the case. And if communication and those softer things aren't done within the medical care which you receive, then actually the individual walks away with stuff where you really need to see a mental health care practitioner, because and things are a lot worse. So you can detect stuff earlier, and you can address things earlier and take preventative actions if there's more care or holistic care is being given in the medical team directly. One of the aspects around the other side of the coin, as it were, is when you connect with a psychologist. Psychologists like to, they tailor the care to the individual, And if they don't know about the rare condition, what neurofibromatosis, what type 1, if they don't understand that, that can be a barrier for them to feel that they can't give the care or support which is needed. And actually, we call it rare aware care. So I think there is training out there. There's available training which is free online for any healthcare professional to get to learn about the commonalities of rare conditions. That whilst each rare condition, and there's over 6,000 of them, are unique and diverse, there's a set of common characteristics which, if you understand those basics, you become rare aware. Actually, that goes a long way to enabling a psychologist to give the support which is needed. So I think we need enhanced medical care to be psychologically informed, but with psychologists and mental health practitioners, they need to be get rare aware training.
That's great. And to our viewers, we're going to be linking out to those resources in the resource tab in your viewing console. Great. And so we've talked about, community, we've talked about the healthcare team and how important that is. I wanted to switch gears a little bit to sort of personal coping mechanisms. We're not always with our doctors, we're not always with our community. How do we day in, day out cope and build resilience? Kathleen, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what the science has been telling us about coping strategies that have shown benefits for people with rare disease.
Yeah, well, many of the things that our lenders here today have talked about are useful. Really taking care of that sleep hygiene. One thing that my recent graduate student, Brooke Bryson, found is that people with rare disorders that involve fatigue can really benefit from activity pacing. And so what activity pacing is the idea that you are aware of the times of day when you have the most energy and the times you have the least. And so being aware of focusing on the things that you value, that you prioritize during the peak energy times, and then being sure to build in rest. And actually, this finding really aligns well with something that's come out of the chronic illness advocacy space, which is the idea of spoon theory. The idea is that everyone wakes up each day with a certain amount of spoons, and some people have more spoons issued than others. And it's your job to think about how to manage those spoons throughout the day. So, these things are really helpful to ensuring that people are able to do the things that are most meaningful for them while, managing any fatigue or pain issues that they might have. I do want to also just kind of bounce off of what Matt was saying around psychotherapy, right? That is certainly a very helpful resource when someone's mental health issues rise to the level of that need. We know in America, at least, that our psychological training for our students does not routinely include information about rare disorders, and frankly, not much about disability or chronic illness at large either. So that means that general psychologists may not be rare aware, as Matt says, and I love that phrase. And there are kind of ways that they can extracurricular their way into learning more about it, but those are few and far between. So one thing that we're really working towards is advocating for more built-in early training, because otherwise it means that as you're assembling your dream team of healthcare professionals, it might involve a whole other odyssey to find the right mental health care provider who gets it.
Yeah, that is a challenge. Anyone who's ever sought that out, I think, understands that. And I did want to check with you guys. So do you have personal coping strategies that have really helped you manage, the anxiety that probably comes along with rare disease and all the other complications? Tanita?
Yes, I actually do. For me, I really work on my sleep hygiene. That is super important because if I don't get enough rest, I am not able to function at a high level the next day or the following days. So keeping a sleep journal, I journal my health, I keep a health journal. I exercise between 3 to 5 times a week. And it's just basic walking or the use of just like chair yoga. I meditate. I do meditation, guided meditation on YouTube, just simple 5-10 minutes. And I try to stay in the present. I try to, not get too ahead of myself. So I like to plan the events of the next day, the day before, so that I kind of have a forecast of what's going to happen the next day. So it's like, okay, from the morning I'm going to be doing this, or I have a doctor's appointment. I have it helps with my anxiety levels, so that I don't feel disconnected with life. I feel more connected. So those are things that I do.
Thanks. Juliet?
There's a couple similar coping mechanisms here. I definitely like to do some yoga. I like to do meditation. I like to spend time outside, getting in the sunshine. It depends where I am with how much physical activity I can do, but just getting outside and watering the plants or something like that is nourishing for my soul. I also try to live in the present, and I also really try to practice gratitude, because there's always something to be thankful for, and so I'm working on that. And there was a missing piece for me, which I just discovered recently, which is, okay, I'm a musician and I have this disease, and they've been two different things. And so when I started exploring my feelings around this in my music, it really, really was therapeutic for me. It felt like what I needed to do to express myself and my feelings around this through my music. So that's been a really cool thing for me too. And I would say, for people who, paint or who like to horseback ride, like if there's a way to mingle those parts of your life together, I feel like that's been really beneficial for me.
And you wrote a book. How did that work into your I imagine that was a ton of work. Like, I couldn't write a book, but you'd just been diagnosed, and then you said about that. Did that activity impact how you were feeling?
Well, actually, writing is very therapeutic for me. So for me, documenting my journey was important. I wanted to document how my backstory, basically. And, it was just one chapter at a time. And then it turned into a book, So I am very grateful that I was able to do that and to express myself in that way. I also, like to find other hobbies. I like to paint. I love art. I love music. Listening to music. These are things that keep my mood even. So that's important for me to do those things on a regular basis, engaging in things that I love. Like, I love animals. So I like, I don't have an animal, but I love other people's animals, and things like that. things that bring me joy, the small things. That's what keeps my mental health, and you know, that's what keeps me healthy.
Yeah, I'll add my two dogs are my biggest coping mechanism.
Everyone go out and get a pet.
Yeah.
And we only have a few minutes left, but I just wanted to touch on briefly, Matt and Kathleen, if you could comment briefly on just access to mental health care. Sort of where are we in the United States, globally? You know, how challenging is it to access mental health services, and are there policy changes that we could help advocate for to increase that access? It's clear that it's a huge benefit.
Well, I can talk about the United States perspective, and I'm really excited to hear what Nat has to say about the situation in Europe. Kind of anyone, regardless of disability or disorder status, who has sought mental health care in America recently may be aware that there are very long wait times, waiting lists, and it can be really hard to access care when you really need it. As I mentioned, we already have a situation where there are only a few psychologists and mental health providers who really have that training about rare diseases. And again, I want to emphasize what Matt said around being rare or rare doesn't mean that we're expecting mental health care providers to know about every single biological process of the thousands of rare diseases that we have, but instead we want them to be aware of the many commonalities that we've shared today around experiences of invalidation and stigma and things like that, to give them a leg up, in terms of starting that therapeutic relationship. There are two things that we're working towards in the U.S. with some advocacy groups, and one is developing better training, and two, which I've already talked about, two is increasing the ability for trained therapists to practice across state borders. So, for example, in my field of psychology, there's something called PsyPact, which allows a certain number of states have agreed to allow therapists to practice across state borders. But not all states are included. And I have a axe to grind here because my state is not included. And so that means that, you have your few expert mental health providers who, could do a really great job of reaching out and connecting with people across the country and supporting them. But we're not able to license them in various states. And also there are challenges around getting insurance payments across state borders. So those are some things that could really make a big difference in access to care here in the US.
Okay. Matt?
Just a couple of things. Globally, we had recently the UN, the United Nations General Assembly, approved a resolution for tackling the challenges of people with a rare condition and their families. And in there, the UN recognised that people with a rare condition, the impact that has on mental health and well-being. The UN calls for member states to develop psychosocial programs for people with a rare condition. So, that's a commitment from the UN, and we need to see that be embedded at a national level. So I think for me, in terms of access to the services, I think, first of all, the foundational support of a community is the first thing which is needed, because that enables us to identify early any mental health issues, to give preventative actions, which is far better than waiting later on until they get more chronic. The psychosocial care for us, which is needed then, is medical care to be enhanced, to be psychologically informed. And we talked about rare aware mental health services. I just wanted to touch on the wider issue that this isn't all about the health system. Our mental health is affected by wider psychosocial risk factors. We've all experienced the recent pandemic and the impact that had on all our lives with social distancing and the measures which are taken in place. So there is opposite to risk factors, there's psychosocial protection factors. So the individual with a rare condition are their mental well-being is impacted beyond the rare condition itself. So we talked about social isolation and discrimination. So there's stuff we all can do in today's society to make people feel included in society, being flexible, that they can continue in education and employment despite having a rare condition. And those things can improve the mental health of our community massively. And the last point really is one of the other protection factors is when you have good physical health and you have the surgery for your throat, or you get the support you need, actually good physical health is also a protection factor for your mental health and well-being as well. So getting the right physical health care is important.
Well, great. Well, unfortunately, we'll have to stop there as we've run out of time. Many, many, many thanks to our panelists today. It was such a great conversation. It was a delight talking to you all. I learned so much that will be helpful for me, and I hope our audience did as well. A reminder to our viewers that you can see a recording of this webinar as well as all the previous events in the series at science.org/webinars. Again, this webinar is our first of 6 in the series running this year, so look out for more coming soon. If you'd like to send us your thoughts on this webinar, please email webinar@AAAS.org. Also, viewers, I wanted to flag that in just a moment, you'll be invited to fill out a brief survey. Your responses are so important and will help guide our future conversations on rare disease. Thank you once again to our panel and to Foundation Ipsen for enabling this conversation with their kind sponsorship. Goodbye, everyone.